Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Brotherhood a Necessity by Raymond Gram Swing. An article taken from Horizon, the Magazine of Useful and Intelligent Living, Volume 2, Number 11, July 1943. Brotherhood a Necessity by Raymond Gram Swing. Two simple aims were announced for the last war. It was to be the war to end wars, and it was to be a war to make the world safe for democracy. At this moment, to recall those aims is to feel the sharpest whiplash, for few, if any, greater failures ever stung the minds of men as does the failure to win the last war after victory had been assured on the field of battle. But having said that, let us admit that the failure was not produced by evil, or indeed by a want of effort. Let us see that we have been victims of a far more destructive influence, the fault of short sight. It happens to have been my own assignment to have reported the last war, and to have reported from Europe much of the effort expended to secure the peace, and to preserve the new democracies created after the war. I should not be able to acquit this generation of its failure. But it is fair to say that it made a tremendous effort. Conference after conference sat, pondered, analyzed, and debated the problems of the peace. Many hopeful gains were made. At moments it seemed as though the great victory was going to be won. More statesmanship was expended than the public knows. Harder, more conscientious work was done than has been acknowledged. In retrospect, one is entitled to the opinion that what was lacking was not the sense of responsibility, but something far more limiting, the scope of mind. That is not to say that we did not all have an education during the last war on certain primary themes. We learned the meaning of militarism, the importance of political freedom, the rights of self-determination. You who recall those days know they were stirring, and hearts indeed were true in seeking the good. Dreams were dreamed of a better world, nor do I belittle such dreams by calling them dreams. I say indeed that without dreams, in the years of terrible tragedy, the impulse from that tragedy fails to work through to constructive ends. What I do suggest is that the dreams during the last war were not expansive enough and inclusive enough, and the failure after that war was the counterpart of the inadequacy of the dreams. And what should mark the difference between the last war and this is in measure of our dreams. Our dreams today can be and must be greater. The achievements after this war can be and must be greater on that account. After the last war, it was not enough to defeat militarism with superior force. It was not enough to draw up documents giving people self-determination. If war was to end, the conditions which produce war had to be understood and changed. Little enough was said about this by the dreamers of 1917 and 1918. Did they have much thought, for example, for living standards in China and India? Did they care much about bestowing the dignity of full equality on the colored races of the world? Great as was the last war, in loss of life and wealth, the thinking it produced did not go deeply enough into world relationships. Now we are discovering that our own safety as free Americans is at stake, and its fate is being decided not behind the defended shores of this continent, but on faraway battlefields and distant seas. Look for a moment at how clear the connection has become between once remote and obscure problems and our own security. We in America suffer from a rubber shortage, which is partly due to the fact that the defense of the Malay Peninsula was without the aid of the natives of that region. Had they been brothers of the white Democrat, in fact, Singapore might not have fallen for many months, or perhaps not at all. The wonderful resistance of the Chinese, which is a large part of our own security against Japan, has been dealt a deep wound in Burma, and the Burma Road is now cut off. The Japanese victory in Burma was based in part on the aid of the Burmese, who had not become brothers of the white man in fact. If we are to win the war, the United Nations must not lose the control of the Indian Ocean, yet who is to say that the Indians themselves have been made sufficiently alive to their membership in our system of human brotherhood to aid in holding India from the Japanese? The resistance in the Philippines turned into a heroic and helpful delaying action through the courage and spirit of the Filipinos. They had been given some measure of brotherhood, and it contributed to our own safety. And we should and do begin to see what man has never seen so clearly before. that brotherhood is not a Sabbath sentiment, it is a crying necessity, a defense, a source of strength, a relationship without which we ourselves are exposed and in dire danger. Out of fragments of experience in this war, we already are learning that we have a responsibility to other peoples, no matter how far away they may be. And if this war should be lost, it would be because of the inadequacy of our past concept and practice of brotherhood. And if it is won, it puts us on the highway to the practice of brotherhood on a scale surpassing the dreams of the past. The sufferings of a person or a nation are the same. In them, the mind is stretched to encompass truth it could not hold before. Today, we of the living generations are seeing truth never before perceived by democratic societies. We are seeing that what we need if we are to survive as free peoples is not less but more freedom. We are beginning to perceive that we cannot remain free behind our oceans and coasts while freedom is denied to nations and races anywhere on the planet. And we are beginning to perceive that political freedom is not of itself sufficient. The world is economic as well as political. Just as political freedom is not safe if it is not part of a world system of political liberties, economic freedom cannot be secure unless it is part of a world order based on economic opportunity for all. We begin to have an inkling of the necessity to our own children and their future that the standard of living shall be raised for millions of men and women in what we call foreign lands, to whose lot we have been comfortably indifferent. In the process of mind stretching, we do not learn policy, we only see. Policy is the subsequent application of a vision. Today we dream, tomorrow we lay the roads to the realization of the dream. All of us dreaming of a dignified and peaceful world may ask ourselves in the anguish of perplexity, how can the dream be realized? How are we going to remain free and yet govern the world by social action? Today, we need not concern ourselves too gravely with the difficulties of policy. There is an element of fate in human destiny. Not a fate dictated by supernatural powers, but the fate of being circumscribed by our own vision. That which we cannot see, we cannot perform. And that which we do see, if we see enough, lies within our ingenuity to achieve. The last war stretched the minds of men to see visions surpassing their previous dreams. They did not establish what they had dreamed. It is said of them scoffingly that they were dreamers. But it should be said of them that they dreamed not wisely enough and not perceptively enough. Today we see much more. We behold it in the peril and wrath and the greatest power of destruction mankind has ever devised and encountered. It is no paradox that in such awful hours men envision their greatest and gentlest potentialities. We are striving for a better good. We failed not because we were not good, but because our concept of the good was inadequate. So it is truth that this must be a war of the people for all peoples, a war for the establishment of brotherhood, a war to be followed by strong nations shouldering their responsibility toward those who are backward and poor. Seeing the war in that perspective, we give the statesmen of the peace the foundation for policy which they did not have after the last war. They tried to build a new world with the tools at hand. And what were the tools? The minds of the men and women of the world. And these minds were partly closed. Now, in the ruins of their failure, we must know that our own preservation is in acknowledging the reality of the power of human brotherhood. This time we open our minds to apprehend that seeing it, we must practice it, lest we perish. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.